Hey everyone, welcome to Agroecological. Right, so we're here again at Glasbren, the Agroecological Permaculture Market Garden, here to find out in the month of March, what does it look like for them? First of all, I need to get Abel in my seat.
Welcome back to the garden. It's March and time for this month's garden tour. So since we last saw you, we had SEEDY Saturday. It was a great local seed swap and eco fair, talks and workshops with some great people like Hugh Richards and Stephanie Haverty and Sue Stickland. Some great food and a great chance for the community to come together at the beginning of the season, emerging from our winter hibernation to swap some seeds, talk about seeds and really get excited about the growing season ahead. So Jason filmed a really great video about the day. So if you want to watch that, click up here. And yeah, we're really well and truly into March now. The temperature's warming up in the tunnel here. You can see the plants in here are looking more green and lush because they've sort of kick-started back into life after their winter stagnation. And we're really starting to think about the growing season. It's really kicked off now. There's a whole fresh bunch of seeds we need to sow. We've started prepping beds. We've had volunteers here helping us get ready for the growing season ahead. We're wood chipping paths, we're laying compost. Yeah, it really feels like the energy's surging now along with the surging energy of spring and we're ready to get started. So yeah, with no further ado, we're going to take another quick garden tour. For those of you that were with us last month for the February garden tour, you'll see some changes have happened, some things have developed, but we'll try, for those of you that are fresh to this video, we'll try and talk through some of the same principles as well. We're also going to focus on the shed, which I didn't talk about last time, which is a really key example of the importance of using local materials and recycled, reused materials when you're gardening or developing a sustainable gardening, food growing project. So yeah, come on, let's go. So before we leave the big tunnel here, I just want to talk to you about something we did yesterday with our volunteers, which was to start to create this temporary nursery bench in the big tunnel here. So this whole left side of the tunnel, come May time, will be planted into tomatoes, 240 tomatoes in here. But until that time, we've shut down the leftmost bed and we are just placing these pallets over the top, suspending them on blocks and things. And this is where all our nursery plants, so our hundreds of tomatoes, squash, beans, anything that we grow in small pots before they go in the ground, they'll all come over here and they'll live here for the last few weeks of their life, of their time in their pots. So this is going to be a really big, long nursery bench just to house those plants temporarily until they're ready to go in the ground. Then we'll take the pallets off, open up the bed, prepare it, and the tomatoes will get planted into there eventually. Welcome back to the seed house. Now you remember, if you watched last month's video, Jason and I building the DIY heated seed bench here on the left. And now a month on, we can see that it's really starting to fill up with plants. We've got all our tomatoes, they're germinating nicely. We've got hundreds of Gardener's Delight as well as some heritage German varieties. And yeah, we're starting to fill it up with other things that we're sowing this time of year. So at the end of March, which is where we are now, really you can get started with sowing your beetroots, your kohlrabis, your kales, your spring onions. So we can start to think about putting our peas and our broad beans out, parsnips, and you can really sow tomatoes up to about this point. Beyond the end of March, it's getting a little late to sow tomatoes. So yeah, we're really starting to sow those things, and we're also sowing things off the bench. So we've got our lettuce, which are germinating in the cold. We've got some radish here, that's almost ready to go into the polytunnel. It's really starting to feel like the bench is filling up, and soon enough this tunnel will just be full of trays. It'll be overflowing, we'll be running out of space. But the heated seed bench is great, it's staying at nice 20, 22 degrees, which is what we need right now. And slowly we'll start to reduce that as the ambient temperature starts to warm up. So yeah, this is really entering the really core main time of sowing, and yeah, all the potential of the harvest ahead. So next on the list, I haven't shown you our packing shed here. Yeah, it's really important when you're developing a ecological permaculture garden of any size to really think about that principle of producing no waste and making use of waste materials and what's available around you. And this shed's a really good example of that. So all of the timber in this shed when we built it was from a local timber merchant just 2 miles away. And then anything else is reclaimed waste materials, recycled materials, like for example, the roof is made from 1,000 wellies discarded at the end of Glastonbury. My co-director Stefan used to run a charity called Reboot, where he would collect all the wellies left behind at the end of Glastonbury and turn them into products. And we turned 1,000 of them into roof shingles. A lot of the wood that wasn't from our local timberman was recycled, reclaimed from a local housing development. And otherwise the windows, doors are all just waste products that people had lying around. Yeah, come inside. So this is the sort of tea station. This is where tea and coffee and lunch and things get made for the volunteers and people on courses and workshops. It's also our tool shed. And then coming into the main shed, this is where in the season we pack the veg boxes. We've got a bit of a cool store kind of pantry area here. And this over here is a kitchen and also a set for, we do cooking demos and demonstrations and sort of recipe videos to help people working with seasonal produce that they get in their veg boxes. So this is kind of where we filmed those. Yeah, it's also an office, communal space, teaching space. It sort of, you know, doubles as so many different uses. It's a great space, really versatile, really adaptable. Yeah, so reusing waste and using materials that people have lying around is a really big part of how we do things in the garden here, whether it's using waste wood and waste materials for buildings or using old tanks from, you know, commercial uses, or barrels from farming, or cut grass and things that go into our compost. All of these things are about reusing materials that otherwise wouldn't be used or would go into landfill. So that's a really important part of how we plan things and shape things, and as much as possible we're trying to use recycled, upcycled and waste materials here in the garden. Okay, let's go and have a look outside. So since we last saw you, we had a great group of growers come here for a Get Started Growing workshop series. Part of what they did while they were here was to start pruning the fruit trees. Hopefully that's going to help them fruit more. We've also mulched all the fruit trees towards the end of the winter to give them a real kick start for the season ahead. So there's not a lot has changed about this section of the garden. Down to the bottom of the hill, we've kind of left this until the kale's finished, until some of the crops that are still there are finished, and then we'll start turning those over for main season planting. But most of the work so far has happened further down the garden, where we've prepped some beds for sowing those first things that we want to get in the ground, like sugar snap peas, broad beans and parsnips. So we've made, over last year, we made loads of hot compost piles, and that's all ready to use now. So with our volunteers and with our workshop participants, we've laid fresh layer of our compost on here, and essentially that's all that goes into the no-dig system. Really, we're just laying fresh layers of compost, preparing it for planting. We've put wood chips in the paths, and that is for two reasons: to make really nice paths to walk on, so we don't have any waterlogging or mud to walk through, but it also inoculates the ground with fungi and mycelium that's really beneficial to the beds and to the vegetables that are growing in them. So here you can see a typical view of what beds look like before we plant in them. This is a classic example of our 75 centimetre wide beds that we use. And we do that for a very clear reason. I might have talked about it in the last video, but that's to make them really nice and easy to step over for the average human. Also really pleasant to work from. You know, you can work the whole bed from one side without straining your body. And that's something we think about a lot with this garden, particularly, is how we can make it easier on our bodies. It's a very steep garden. A lot of it's on a slope. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of work to maintain this garden. So any way that we can sort of save our bodies, reduce the strain, and make things easier for ourselves, we try to do that. And this is a key way of doing that. It's also really well adapted to some of the key tools that we use. So the rakes are 75 centimeters wide. Our broad fork is also the same width. And yeah, it's really well suited to some of the other seeding tools and things like that that you might want to use on a small human scale market garden sort of setup. So it's about time to do the first outdoor sowing. So for this bit, I need Jason to come and give me a hand. So let's go. So we're going to sow some parsnips in here. We've got some tender and trues from the seed co-op. Little trick, we're going to sow them alongside some French breakfast radish, because basically to use the radish as a marker, and because the radish germinate a lot quicker than the parsnips, that'll show us where the lines of parsnips are. So when we're hoeing and weeding, we know exactly where the parsnips are, so we don't disturb the seed. So yeah, so what we want to do is sow the parsnip about 3 inches apart, and then just sort of sprinkle the radish along the line just as little markers. And then obviously that's a really great catch crop that we can harvest before we harvest the parsnips out of the same bed. So yeah, should we get started? Could you pass me some parsnips? Great, thank you. But the beautiful thing is, just to comment on, is despite the amount of rain we've had the last few days and the last few weeks, you can see it's not waterlogged at all. That's the beauty of this system of no-dig growing, is no matter what the weather, generally speaking, you can continue to work the beds, whereas traditionally with digging and with ploughing and all those things, that really churns up the soil, creates a lot of mud, makes it a bit of a nightmare to do any planting this time of year. So one of the reasons why it works so well for us. So there's a permaculture principle: use the edges and value the margins, and it's a really key principle of permaculture garden. And here at Glasbren, we have our garden really tucked in right at the edge of a woodland, of a native woodland. So, and a big part of what we do is wild food. So we tend to bring wild food into our veg boxes for our veg box members. We like to do lots of cooking demos and online videos around how to work with wild food as well as the cultivated food that we have in the garden. We're going to take a quick look at this time of year, late March, what sort of wild food is out there. And one of the key ones that's really exciting this time of year and really defines this point of spring is wild garlic. So follow me. So a key part of eating with the seasons has always been integrating wild food into our diet, because it's food that's available in the natural ecosystems around us, and within sustainable limits we're able to harvest that food for free and nourish ourselves with super nutrient dense food, forage, leaves, nuts, berries. And one of the great things happening this time of year is the young shoots of the wild garlic. So here we have a little patch here that we have at the bottom of the garden, just where it meets the edge of the woodland and the river here. And we love to use wild garlic as pesto, so mix it in with things like with olive oil, salt, maybe some nuts, seeds, which you can use on all kinds of things, pizzas, pasta, all your favorite dishes. The best time to use it, I think, is when it's in its earliest stages, the next few weeks, before it flowers, really full of flavor, full of taste. You can also eat the flowers once they come in later on in the season, but this is the really exciting time. The only thing I'd say to you is harvest sustainably, don't take too much, and yeah, I hope you enjoy adding this to your diet. This is a really exciting time of year for wild greens, because all of the young shoots of the wild greens like dandelion, plantain, dock, things like that are all coming out, and this is the time when they're at their best. They're most nutrient dense, they're most flavoursome is right now. So especially with the Hungry Gap coming, a time when in the garden it's not so possible to produce or to be harvesting a lot of food, wild food really comes into its own. And historically this is a time when people would have really lent on things like nettles, seaweed, wild garlic, plantain, dandelion, the kind of things that are available and the nutrients that are available in the wild, because there isn't a lot you can grow, especially without a polytunnel at this time of year.
Okay, that's it for today. Like Abel mentioned at the start of the video, SEEDY Saturday. If you're interested in learning more about that, Abel, tell us more. Why should someone go and watch that video after watching this one?
Well, Jason's made a really great video about SEEDY Saturday 2023 in Carmarthen, which is an annual seed swap eco fair. There's talks and workshops this year. We had the likes of YouTuber and author Hugh Richards, no-dig expert Stephanie Haverty, and Sue Stickland, the seed saving expert, lots of other people from the world of seeds and seed sovereignty, and loads of cool and inspiring conversations happened. And it was really a special and moving day when the whole growing community of West Wales comes together at the end of the winter, where we've all been kind of doing our own thing. We come out to share seeds, share knowledge, meet with each other, and really have a sense of the power of that growing community that we have around here. And as the organisers of Glasbren, it was really touching and moving for us to be able to facilitate that space for our community and to feel part of such a vibrant community dedicated to this craft of growing and improving the land that we live on.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to end it there because my arm is getting tired and I need to put the camera down. Okay,
see you in April. Bye-bye. Bye.